Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a Undercolor of Law hot take on the ABC settlement of the defamation suit brought by Trump. So did ABC fold like a cheap suit? That's what a lot of people think. Kind of, but let's go through this a little bit and break it down. So they settled for $15 million to be paid in the future as a donation to the Trump Presidential Library. All right, no snide remarks on the Trump Presidential Library idea. Plus $1 million in legal fees. Now remember, settling a case is not an admission of guilt or liability, it's just settling the case. In this instance, however, not only did they settle the case, but there's also an apology that was issued. And so it certainly has the flavor of looking like, oh, we did something wrong, we want to make up for it. So let's take a little bit of a legal analysis look at this, and let's first examine the definition of what defamation is. And basically, to prove what they call a prima facie case of defamation, there are four elements. One, a false statement purporting to be fact. We'll put this up for you to look at. Two, a publication or communication of that statement to a third person. Three, fault amounting to at least negligence. And fourth, damages. So really, the only thing that's not at issue is number two, right? Obviously, it's national interview. This was ABC, George Stephanopoulos, big interview with Nancy Mace. Obviously, they communicate this to a third person. The rest, though, is really questionable, starting with the fact that, as you've all probably heard, truth is usually a defense to defamation, libel, slander, etc., which all fall under this notion of defamation. And so the first problem here is, isn't it true? So if you look at what actually happened here, the question is, did the interviewer improperly use the word rape, quote unquote? And actually, I should have said this in the beginning. I'm going to give you a mild trigger warning. We're going to talk about sexual assault, and some of it may be a little bit clinical. I apologize. I used to be a sex crimes prosecutor, so I have a very clinical approach to these things. But, mild trigger warning, we are going to talk about sexual assault. So he used the word rape, and that word isn't the actual word that appears in what Trump was found liable for. And a lot of people tend to think of the word rape as being very specific to criminal law, and therefore one objection here on Trump's team is that, well, you can't use it because it was a civil case, not a criminal case. There's some other nuances to it that are actually historically and sociologically really important to look at. But let's start with actually listening to the interview that happened with Mace, and we'll play a little bit of it, and you can listen to it. I mean, it's a longer interview, it's like 10 minutes, but I think you'll get the flavor for it here, so let's take a listen.
And for defaming the victim of that rape. How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony we just saw?
Well, I will tell you, I was raped at the age of 16. And any rape victim will tell you, I've lived for 30 years with an incredible amount of shame over being raped. I didn't come forward because of that judgment and shame that I felt. And it's a shame that you will never feel, George. And I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me about another potential rape victim. I'm not gonna do that.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald Trump.
No, you are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by a jury. It's been affirmed by a judge.
It was not a criminal court case, number one. Number two, I live with shame. And you're asking me a question about my political choices, trying to shame me as a rape victim, and I find it disgusting. And quite frankly, E. Jean Carroll's comments when she did get the judgment, joking about what she was going to buy, it makes it harder for women to come forward when they make a mockery out of rape, when they joke about it.
Doesn't it make it harder for women to come forward when they are
It makes it harder when other women joke about it, and she's joked about it. I find it offensive.
So you can see that Mace is arguing with the interviewer. Her argument is, you're trying to shame me, her, for her political support of Trump because she should be ashamed to support Trump when she herself was a sexual assault victim, which is true. Now, one can quibble with the logic of what she's saying, and obviously the interviewer disagreed with her that he was trying to shame her. But she did set a nice trick box for the interviewer that he found very hard to get out of, because she set up the situation where you're disagreeing with me for my political views, but the reason you seem to be disagreeing with me is based on the fact that I myself was a sexual assault survivor. Okay, that's a problematic position for the interviewer to be in, actually. But the issue is that had nothing to do with the defamation claim. She wasn't claiming she was being defamed. The defamation suit is Trump arguing that he did not rape E. Jean Carroll and that the findings about that were simply not rape, and therefore when the interviewer used that word, that was wrong. It was defamation. Now, hidden in the snippet of that interview is when Nancy Mace makes the reference to, quote, it was not a criminal case, or she says this was not in a criminal court, after which she then goes on to shame E. Jean Carroll, right? She says she doesn't think that E. Jean Carroll behaved in an appropriate way, that the way that she behaved hurt other assault survivors. You know, so even though she's against shaming sexual assault survivors, she feels quite free to judge them in this instance. But the legal argument boils down to terminology. And importantly, a federal judge, Judge Kaplan, actually talked about this question of the terminology. And his language was a little bit tortured, but a quote is that the finding of the sexual assault, that Trump sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll, quote, does not mean that she failed to prove that Mr. Trump, quote, raped, unquote, her, as many people commonly understand the word rape, in quotes. He continued, quote, as the evidence at trial recounted below makes clear, the jury found that Mr. Trump, in fact, did exactly that. So it's a little bit of a legal point. We like to say distinction without a difference. But let's look at what the difference actually is. Under New York State law, the criminal law, rape can only be, this is the graphic part, rape can only be penetration with a penis. They don't count any other form of sexual assault as rape. That's their definition. So in the Trump civil case, the jury only found what's called digital penetration, meaning he used his fingers to commit the assault and penetrated her. Now, under federal law, that would be considered the highest form of sexual abuse, called first-degree sexual abuse. It would be that way in D.C., where I was a sex crimes prosecutor for many years. That criminal code was updated to eliminate the word rape in place of different degrees of sexual assault. There are really important policy reasons, logical reasons, and historical reasons for that, and a lot of scholars have debated this, but I can sum it up for you this way. Using the term sexual assault places the focus on the violence of the crime, and it is a violent crime. It's not a crime of sexuality, it's a violent crime, and by calling it that, it really places the focus where it should be, which is on the assault. Also, the word rape, quote unquote, carries with it a big amount of baggage of misogynism historically in the culture for hundreds of years. And for example, as pointed out from an article a while back in Bustle magazine, the word comes from the Latin term for meaning to seize or carry off by force, and it's associated with words like larceny, chattel. The root and cultural connotation of this word suggests that a woman's vagina is property that can literally be stolen. Given its root, the word rape, quote unquote, reduces a human being to something like a basket of bread sitting in a baker's window waiting to be pilfered. That is the historical concept, and it's also been pointed out that if you look at the biblical notion of women being chattel, it goes back to that. Interestingly, you can also see that's where the seeds of Trump's repeated statements like, she's not my type, right? He always talks about that when it's an allegation of sexual assault, she's not my type. That's where it comes from, right? The mindset that he reveals is she's not the kind of chattel property that I would want, so why would I forcibly take it or steal it? So it's a very outdated term, and there's good reason why it's really become subsumed under sexual assault rather than using that. Now, ABC and the interviewer obviously could have relied on what the federal judge termed the sexual assault, which said basically it is going to be rape. However, from a strictly legal point of view, I would say that if the interviewer was choosing his words very carefully, if the legal team was vetting what he said and then they knew exactly what Trump had been found liable for, then he could have steered clear of this controversy because, why not just use the word sexual assault instead of choosing the word rape, especially once he began to get pushback from the interviewee. But if you'd gone to trial with it or gone further in litigation, the judge would have been a pretty good rationale for why he said that. But again, the only reason the judge had to say that was because the judge felt he needed to clear up that controversy. So that's where you get to the negligent prong, which is ABC might have been negligent in not being extremely precise in that terminology. But you have to weigh what the normal next steps would have been in defending a defamation suit. There were depositions already scheduled. And while the interviewer had relatively little to fear about the deposition, he would just say, he could rely on the judge, this is the common notion of it. It would have been quite a problem for Trump, right? He's got to re-air all the details of his sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll in his deposition. It's like retrying the whole thing. This is why people don't like to go to trials over defamations, because truth is a defense. The whole thing gets aired out again, which is bad for his reputation. Now, it's common sense that ABC wouldn't want to aggravate the next president by making him deal with this whole thing again. Truth is the defense. He would have wanted to avoid the truth. What's new about that? But even worse is ABC's capitulation here is what part of looks like a real trend of currying favor towards Trump. There's the Washington Post deciding not to endorse for any presidential candidate. The LA Times owner did that same thing. It's basically a part of the authoritarian playbook to seek to take over the media and bend them to the authoritarian's will so that they become just a propaganda piece. An example would be in Hungary, where defamation is being criminalized, so it's not a civil penalty anymore, it's going to become a crime. You also see the trend of Kash Patel, Pete Hegseth, all having their lawyers threatening defamation over anyone who dares to criticize them, ignoring the fact that they're public figures. They exist to be criticized. That's our system of free speech. This kind of capitulation by ABC emboldens folks like that. It emboldens the Trump regime. And it very much makes his supporters feel they are teaching the media a lesson and that there's no value to the media. Now, the mainstream media has, I feel, failed us for a lot of different reasons in a lot of different ways. And some of those reasons involve the corporate interest and the billionaires that own them. But the solution still remains more sunlight, more reporting, more voices, not less. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate the comments, and we will talk to you again soon.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.